Okay, good afternoon, students. I just wanted to give you some writing tips about some things that I've noticed on your papers and also the issues and problems that I see with Kingsborough students in general. So among any paper, I always tell students the most important thing is always your introductory paragraph. And the most important thing and the biggest problem, hands down, that I see among Kingsborough students is that students often don't have a clear main argument. And by the way, the document that I'm referring to here is Short Critical Writing Assignment Writing Tips, which is available on the course homepage. It's the Short Critical Writing Assignment Writing Tips sheet. But in any case, the major problem I see is that students don't have a strong main argument. It's unclear or lacks details. So the number one thing you should do is make sure you have a strong main argument in your introductory paragraph that lists your supporting arguments. Now, to this end, I've given you a checklist of what a good thesis statement should accomplish. The most important thing it should satisfy is assessing the significance or so what question about your paper. You need to make an argument that is unique, interesting, your own take on the issue. What your paper should not be is a compilation of facts. Okay, so I ask you, have you made an interesting, unique, compelling argument? What are you saying that's new? What we don't want is a sort of high school style all about X book report. We don't want you to just sort of list facts or list a story. We want you to make an argument. Okay, you should make sure your thesis statement is specific enough. We always want to use third person. So that is to say, we do not want to use the first or second person. We don't want to use I, we, or you in essays. Please do not use I, we, or you in essays, and make sure you use formal academic writing, not slang. You want to make sure, this applies sometimes to many theses, that you've qualified your thesis, that you've made limitations. You add key words like always, sometimes, largely, exclusively, to give your thesis statement some limitations to avoid making it sort of easily shot down. This is very important. Make sure your introductory paragraph contains not only your thesis statement should be about 2 sentences, perhaps 3, but it also should contain the supporting arguments that relate to your thesis statement. This is very important. So your introduction should contain your thesis statement, your supporting arguments, and I know this is stating the obvious, but each and every body paragraph should directly relate back to the main argument and reiterate the main argument. Okay, these are things to consider. Ideally, your introduction also needs some sort of hook, some interesting way to start the paper, whether a word picture, whether an image, whether a sort of anecdote, whether a quote, whether the idea of like challenging the traditional view, saying something new. You need some interesting way to start the paper, and then the conclusion comes back to the thesis but puts a new twist on it. Okay, so hands down, the number one problem I see with early college students is that they don't have a clear, sharp thesis statement that guides their paper. Related to this is really the biggest issue I'd like most of you to think about going forward, is the difference between narrative and analysis. What is narrative writing and what is critical analysis? We are aiming for critical analysis. Narrative is the idea of telling what happened, like a story, retelling a story, retelling history. Analysis is something different. It's not looking at just what happened, but why and how something happened. Critically analyzing why and how a given story happened. So often I find, and this happened very much with the Gilgamesh papers, but often I find that students sort of make the mistake of feeling compelled, feeling forced that they need to retell the entire story in question and not use that story to support their arguments. Okay, so for instance, with the Epic of Gilgamesh paper, you didn't actually have to tell me the entire story. What I wanted you to do is use parts of that story to support your argument around the main universal themes it addresses. Okay, this is really something important that you'll need to learn and think about. So when writing, you want to focus on analytical writing, analyzing events and facts, and not just retelling them. This applies not only to stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh, but when you're dealing with any sort of history or historical figures. For instance, in another paper, when I asked you to compare and contrast two historical figures, actually Egyptian pharaohs, you don't have to chronologically go through each and every event and detail of their reign. What you need to do is make an argument about each figure. Okay, so this is something I'd like you to think about, the difference between narrative and analysis, and what we don't want to do is sort of all about X book reports. You know, we don't want to just list a story. We don't just want to tell facts. We always have to focus our paper around our main argument and around the critical analysis. Sometimes students offer a lack of supporting details, or they just offer superficial coverage. The rest of the questions, the rest of the issues you can look at here. These are not issues that I'm going to address right now. We will come back to these ideas later in the semester, but for now I would just like everybody in the class to really think about the difference between narrative and analysis, and making sure your thesis statement fits all of these criteria here. And in general, as a tip, what I'm really looking for in the short critical writing assignments is that you show me your independent analysis of the assigned primary source text, and that you really show me what critical analytical writing is. So not just retelling the story, but focusing on the themes and the questions that I give you. Feel free to look at these further issues, and I'm always happy to help you with your paper during office hours in person. Okay, thank you very much.